Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today we have the two lions of the Senate. I'm honored to have you here. Senator Stuart Ingle and Senator John Arthur Smith, welcome back.
Lorraine, thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, I trust you both so much, and together you have 58 years of experience in the Senate. Stuart, you are the minority floor leader. You lead the Republicans in the Senate. You're a Republican from a very large district, District 27.
Yes. All rural districts are large anymore.
Yeah.
They started that way and got bigger.
And you came up here first in 1985. You've been here 31 years.
That's correct. This is the start of my 32nd year.
Well, hats off. Hats off. And you, Senator John Arthur Smith, you are the chair of Senate Finance. You are affectionately known as Dr. No because of your control of and understanding of Senate finance and state finances. I prefer to think of it as Dr. No, K-N-O-W, because you know so much about it. But you came up in 1989. You're pushing 27, 28 years?
Fixing to start my 28th year. We're into it.
And you also have a very large district, District 35, but you live in Deming.
Live in Deming, but I have Lordsburg, TRC, and Las Cruces.
Lots of driving, both of you.
Absolutely. They're all big. I have 5 counties. He's got 4. It's, our rural districts continue to grow because we just don't have the population increase as quick as our metropolitan areas. And, it's a tough world out there.
It is a tough world out there. We'll get to the economy and what's happening, but there are 2 things I particularly would love to have feedback from you on. Of course, state finances, and we've had a shock to our system as the price of oil has gone down so low per barrel. That's one issue I'd love to hear both of you about. And then last year, you together put together a perfect compromise bill on the real ID and the driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. It was a great bill, and it went nowhere. And as a matter of fact, it's back. But let me read just from today's blog, a blogger named Joe Monahan. He put this: the state of this state's polarized, drifting, and going nowhere politics is no better symbolized than by the never-ending squabble over driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. Here you have the spectacle of 2 of the most respected guys around the roundhouse, GOP State Senator Stuart Ingle and Dem Senator John Arthur Dr. No Smith, treated like ants at a picnic by the radical House Republicans and their misguided acolytes in the business community. Well, are you being treated like ants at the picnic? You already solved this problem last year. What happened?
Well, the Senate passed the bill, and the thing about it is just because it was passed in the Senate, as House bills are often passed, sometimes it doesn't get a hearing over there, it doesn't pass. Just as House bills sometimes pass the House and don't get a hearing in the Senate. It's one of those things. John Arthur and I, mostly John, ended up working on the bill as much as anybody, and we both signed it. It was a compromise bill. It was a 2-tier bill, or as the way we thought it was, and it was a good start to an agreement that could be worked out. Hopefully we'll get a little further this year than we have before, and the thing about it is we have to solve the problem, and both sides have to realize that we have to solve it, and the idea of having one side dictate how it's always going to be is not going to work. We're going to have to come together and get the job done.
Senator Ingle and I share a lot in common on this particular issue. We were supportive of the governor's position for 5 straight years, and it really wasn't going anywhere. I was somewhat of the outlier in my own party, going against the wishes of my caucus. But the bottom line was we resolved that something has to be done. We have to try and take care of this. Real ID is the law of the land, and we're going to have to comply with it. And so we modified our position somewhat and said, let's try something different. You can't expect different results doing the same thing all the time. And the bill was an effort to let's try something different to see if we can't get Real ID through. it accomplished quite a bit. I mean, it's obviously on the front burner right now. We're having discussions about that, and hopefully through working in a bipartisan fashion, when we have agreement, bipartisan is what I determine is the criteria for agreement, and I'm talking with the legislative branch at this stage, and obviously we have to also work with the executive branch to get something through. So we're hoping that early on that we can possibly get something moving. There's several bills in the pipeline right now that they're working on this, and we've got ongoing discussions taking place, and so we're encouraged from that standpoint.
Well, just today, the House Judiciary held a hearing in the House chambers, and they let everyone who was against the bill speak. That took quite some time, and the people that were in favor of the bill speak, and the committee was able to ask questions. And so what I've been worried about is that there's been a real disinformation campaign. That this whole thing about you can't fly to see your grandmother at Thanksgiving unless you have a passport. And so TSA has come out and said, you can use it to drive, you can use it to fly domestically, you cannot use it to get into a top secret military base, but who's trying to get into these bases? And they know that they have to have other ID. And what percentage of our population has that problem? Not many. So Homeland Security, TSA, recently our Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham spoke about you don't need passports. We have 2 years to solve this. I think the citizens of New Mexico would love to solve it now. Just get this issue out of our hair. We've got so many other things going on. So right now there's a couple of bills in the House. There's the Pacheco-Nunez bill, and Daniel Ivey-Soto, Senator Ivey-Soto, has one in the Senate. And is that at all like yours? I'd love the bill you had was perfect in my eyes.
I haven't read that bill yet, but I'm told through the sponsor that it's very similar to the bill that we had last year, and we certainly will be looking at that. Additional bills will be dropped. We've been looking at bills throughout the country. New Mexico is not unique. The exact number of states that are not real ID compliant is significant. I think somewhere around 25 or 26 on that. So the rhetoric out there is that we're outliers, and that's just not the case. Other states have stepped to the plate, coming up with a two-tier system that is palatable to their constituents.
Utah is one.
Yeah. California is one on that, and I think Texas has one.
Texas has one. Colorado has one. The thing about it is we have to make a decision on this. We've tried to, as Senator Smith said, he and I both have supported the governor's, bills on this. They haven't gotten through. She has in turn said that she's changed her position. We're going to have a way to fix this thing, and we've got to have a way of fixing it. The bill that Representative Pacheco and Representative Nunez has, I think she supports that. The thing of it is the Homeland Security people came out with some information on federal bases. That's any federal base. It doesn't have to be top secret. Cannon Air Force Base is a special ops base. I called the base commander when this first came out, and I said, how does this affect you? And he said it doesn't. Before you can get on this base, we have to look at your driver's license and take a look at it, and we do a very quick background check to make sure who you are and where you say you are, where you live. Then they issue a badge of their own. Mm-hmm. That never bothered their activity there at all. Every construction worker, everybody that comes on that base has one. Other bases hadn't done that. A special ops base does. The thing about it is this was coming. We all knew it was coming. And we seem to think if we ignore it, and Homeland Security, I wish had been a little more forthright in coming with this. That's an agency that's been around a while. We don't hear too much from them, and then the terrorism breaks out again, and all of a sudden everything's on the front burner. Yeah. Well, the thing about it is we've got to solve this problem, and both sides have to come together and work this out. And the thing about it is there's folks out here from other countries that do a lot of work in this state, work for lots of different industry, and we're not going to have those people leaving. It doesn't matter how they got here, they're not going to be leaving. They're all over the United States. We do not have a younger labor force like we had 40 years ago when I was a young man. The average age of the American male in the United States is 47 years old. We're barely replacing ourselves. Childbirth is, 2 kids is a big family. We're really not having actually 2 kids per married couple. The thing about it is we've got to come to life on some of this stuff and make sure that we're serving industry that has folks employed here. They've got to have driver's licenses. If they need to be something that says you're not a citizen of the United States, that's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. You're not going to be picked up for that.
Yeah.
Let's come to life on this thing. Let's get this problem solved. We have other issues in New Mexico that take much more precedence over this. And our citizens may at one time or another have to go to the trouble of producing birth certificates and things to get a license they can get on an airplane with. It's coming. We don't know when it is for sure, but it is coming. They said 2 years. Have another terrorist incident somewhere, they'll shorten that like crazy. We got to get the job done here.
Yeah.
New Mexico has got to go forward. We can do it.
Well, I'm hoping that it will be this session, and I thank you both for all of your efforts on this. Now, you mentioned some of the other burning issues. Well, here we are, a state that has benefited so much by the oil and gas industry for so many years, and now there has been the crash in the cost of oil per barrel. I was at Costco last week. It was $1.46 a gallon at the pump. I mean, you just want to go driving around practically. But so you have been in the unenviable position of telling the lawmakers and the citizens that it's time to do the tighten up.
We live and die by oil in the state of New Mexico. Oil and its related industries deliver 32 to 35% of our entire general fund, well over $2 billion. To the state, and when the prices are high, it's wonderful. When the prices are low, we suffer. We have a process in the state of New Mexico. We have to have a balanced budget, and we have to have a team of economists trying to determine what we think our revenues are going to be starting this next July. And they start early on, and back in August, they said we thought we're going to have $293 million in new money. To go on top of our $6.3 billion budget. That was questioned at the time, and I'm often reminded that, this is consensus. The legislature participated with it, and the executive with the Department of Transportation, Tax Department, and DFA participated. And so as a result, everybody's supposed to be on board. I've rebutted that on the basis our economists may be on board, but that doesn't mean individual legislative members are on board with that. And I guess the positive thing that came out of that in August, both Republicans and Democrats were skeptical on the reliability of that revenue stream. In December, that 293 was reduced to $232 million. And at that time, in a bipartisan fashion, we were suspicious of the reliability of that. We're anxiously awaiting for another revenue estimate coming out, and we do believe that it's going to be very, very anemic on that. And so we're going to have to move forward, hopefully in a responsible fashion, to try and be as fair as we know how with the resources that we have. And I think the executive wants to be as fair as we possibly can be on that. So this is going to be a collective effort between the executive branch and the legislative branch, trying to pull something together, but we're somewhat at the mercy of oil and gas, and it's sort of a reflection of changes that need to be made. Don't want to get rid of oil and gas, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to have a broader base of revenues supporting our needs of education, higher ed, and healthcare and law enforcement.
Well, we're speaking today with two of my favorite senators, Senator Stuart Ingle, Republican Minority Floor Leader in the Senate, and Senator John Arthur Smith, Head of Senate Finance, and we're discussing the financial picture that New Mexico and state finances are facing. Well, how can you possibly communicate to the average New Mexican how this is going to impact them?
Well, the thing about it is this is not the first time this has happened in this state. I was here in the elected in the mid-'80s, and under the Knight administration, when I started, oil was at $30-some a barrel, highest it's ever been. And 2 years later, Governor Carruthers was elected. His first year or so, it was kind of still high, as I remember. all of a sudden we went from $30 down to $7 a barrel. It literally rolled the sidewalks up in Hobbs and Lovington. And we didn't have the reserves that we have now. But the thing about it is, we still got through it. We had to come back and do some revenue enhancements, whatever you want to call them, tax increases that year. And a Republican governor never wants to do that, but the treasurer said, we don't have the money to get us through. We had to come back. We had to do it. They were very small increases. But the point of it is we have to balance the budget. And the thing about it is, this isn't anybody's fault, except that the world is drilling oil wells in a fashion under the horizontal method of oil and gas drilling.
Yeah, fracking.
That,
Yeah.
well, fracking, you want to
And-
call it that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And their geology is so much better. We don't have many dry holes. We're recovering a lot of oil. The Permian Basin, thank God, is still a basin that has huge oil and gas potential, and most of it's in New Mexico. We're going to realize the revenues out of this, but right now they're pretty cheap, and oversupply always causes that. And the thing about it is 82% of the oil and gas royalty acres are either under state or federal control, and the state is the royalty owner or the owner, and that's a tremendous amount of money for the state that many don't have. And the thing about it is, we've been here before. We're going to have to make some tough decisions, but we can make that happen because you don't have a choice. You have to sit down and work with both sides, make the thing work. And the thing about it is, we'll have the money through the rest of the year, starting in July. There's going to be some people that won't be as happy about it as they wanted to be, but the thing about it is, our folks and friends in Washington don't have to balance budgets. We do here.
Mm-hmm.
Lorraine, we've been ridiculed because we've tried to keep a 10% reserve due to the volatility of oil and gas. And now I'm starting to hear talk. We're down in the 5 and 6% range in the year we're in on that. And now I'm hearing a little rhetoric out there, well, why didn't you keep greater reserves? So we were condemned on one side when we were higher than most states. And now they're starting to realize that, hey, this is serious. And why didn't you have greater reserves?
Well, I heard you say on the Senate floor last week, you were putting out a call to agencies who are coming before Senate Finance that they should start looking at cuts in this year's budget. Now, the whole function of the 30-day session is to prepare the budget for the upcoming year. You are telling them, and my hair just stood on end, that you better look at ways you can trim right now.
Well, we're getting late into the fiscal year because they've only got 5 months to respond on that. It makes it very difficult for the agencies, and they need to look at ways where they can save money because it gives us a bounce going into the next year budget. It gives us reserves that we would like to have. Our focus on this budget that we're doing for 17 is to rebuild our reserves because of the volatility. So we have a huge responsibility there, but it's painful when you're doing that.
It's also painful because we're just buffeted by global issues, the global gas glut. And, and there's not much we can do about it. We're blessed with what we've been given in terms of our mineral resources, but we can't, look at the whole world picture.
Oil and gas is a worldwide market, just like almost every product that we sell in New Mexico. Agriculture products are that way. Our grain products are that way, meat products, milk prices, they're all worldwide markets. That's why sometimes people that don't understand, how those things are influenced. And the prices depend on a worldwide market, and that has nothing to do with whether it works for you or not. And, we've got supposedly all this Iranian oil is going to come back on the market. I'm sure some of it's been there anyway, but now it's going to be an open free flow that we haven't had. And, we were in the 30s before that ever opened up, and now that's coming back. Nobody adjusts these markets anymore by the producer that's producing it. So much of this stuff is done by speculators in our markets, and those things are so hard to figure and so hard to realize. We have to constantly be on a watch and be very careful how we spend money, because you can get yourself into a real bad spot quickly. And thank goodness John Arthur's been on finance. I was on with him when he was first here, and I was on for 18 years. And he's a good chairman. And, party label doesn't always define things up here, thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness.
Because we need to make sure that we look at things where it fits all the citizens of the state of New Mexico. And that's what we try to do, and he's done a pretty darn good job, I think.
Well, both of you are really, great New Mexicans and great public servants together. 58 years of public service in the Senate. That's huge. But you talk about you need more reliable revenue streams. I know last year in the 60-day you had proposed a gasoline tax, a way to buy lottery tickets would make it easier, and the hold harmless the food tax. That.
You know what people don't realize with the hold harmless portion, and that was a great buzzword that was put out.
Because it's incomprehensible.
Well, basically on food tax, what happened, and prescription drugs, the state paid local government not to impose the tax. Well, that was only supposed to be a $40 million hit. That had grown last year on the local government portion, where we're up fronting to local governments $150 million a year to hold them harmless. Not only did we forego that, but we also gave up $200 million from the state's perspective on gross receipts. So we actually gave up close to $400 million in available revenues for appropriation purposes. That $150 million last year to local governments was projected to grow to $1 billion upfront money for local governments coming from the state. It was not sustainable. And so something had to be done. And so obviously the food tax was a category that can generate a lot of dollars potentially, but there's not the political will there. It gives a more reliable revenue to us. But when you forego close to $400 million in available revenues, that alone out of the $240 million would be going to education, public ed, and higher ed.
Well, many times when people talk about a reliable revenue stream, they talk about overhauling our tax structure. And I remember Senator Keller, now our auditor, has been talking for years about a tax expenditure budget to finally sit down for once and look at all these exemptions that we have, and maybe some of them are no longer appropriate, maybe closing some of them, which would be a tremendous revenue stream.
Well, we believe it would be a tremendous revenue stream if it's a deduction or a credit. Then we can measure. But when it's an outright exemption, there's no way to record what we're foregoing on that, and we can guess at it, but we really cannot quantify it on that. So virtually every expenditure needs to be in the credit or deduction category, so at least we can measure that.
Yeah.
We can't do the exemptions right now.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is I remember my first years up here, there was a gentleman named Franklin Jones that basically was the author of all our gross receipts packages that were passed and funded state government. And the reason we were more extensive than other states on gross receipts is we have in a lot of counties where there's maybe no more than 10% of the people pay any tax at all except gross receipts. And the thing about it is what we used to do when we had surpluses, we would rebate what that was to the individual or individual family. And the thing about it is, I remember in those years when we had oil was $120, $130 a barrel, we had so much money flowing in here that, it's so easy to say, well, we don't need that anymore. We can, we're always criticized for this or that. Every state has tax or revenue measures that they have. We get criticized sometimes for things we have that other states don't have, but New Mexico's property tax is still the biggest bargain in the United States compared to most states. People pay more taxes on many times on their house in the state of Texas than the individual would ever pay on income tax or gross receipts in the state of New Mexico. Those things are never mentioned. Every state has to have a source of revenue. New Mexico is a state that has unbelievable tourist travel. Our tourists were helping pay a lot of those bills for us. We could rebate some of those things. We have sources of revenue, and oil and gas is our main source, and when it takes a dip, we all have to take part of that dip with it. There's so many things we've passed that the estimates were so wrong on what it would truly cost, because it's really hard to define things in a tough way sometimes when you're talking about no tax on this or that.
We just have a minute and a half left, so I'm going to ask each one of you to guide us. What should we really look for? What might be one of the most important things that nobody's aware of coming out of the session, besides, of course, the budget and the driver's licenses?
Well, I think they can look forward to the fact it's supposed to be a short session.
Yeah.
But with that being said, you can't move away from the budget. They're going to be watching closely as we disclose and identify exactly what our shortfall is going to be. I think that's the number one issue. I know there's other issues out there, that crime issues, driver's license issues, ethics issues right there, but this is a fiscal session. Our first responsibility is to education, health care, law enforcement, and judiciary.
Excellent.
There's going to be some issues, some court decisions that are going to be very, very meaningful as to what happens to this state. Workman's compensation for the producer of raw agriculture products was ruled unconstitutional by a court. Now it means every farmer and rancher is going to have to pay workman's compensation. People say, well, gosh, that should be done anyway. Well, the thing of it is that part of the agriculture industry in particular has every price they have is based on worldwide markets. They can't raise their prices. It's going to be an awful tough world for dairymen and all of our ranchers and things and farmers, because when you can't pass on a cost, which we never get to pass it on anyway, but the thing about it is this is a very significant cost. We've also had a lawsuit pertaining to a medical malpractice problem from the east side of the state with a doctor at Texas Tech University. And our courts have ruled you can sue a Texas doctor from New Mexico. That has opened some eyes all over this nation, and believe me, before business locates here, they read things like that, and those kind of decisions, they say, my God, I don't think we want to locate there. They have a court system that makes some really funny decisions.
Well, we could go on, but we have run out of time. We'll just have to continue this next session. I want to thank our guests today, Senator John Arthur Smith, head of Senate Finance, Democrat from Deming. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And Senator Stuart Ingle, the minority floor leader,
Thank you
Republican
so
from
much.
Portales.
Always a pleasure to be here.
I learned so much. It's just a real gift you give to the New Mexico after your 58 years of public service. So thank you. And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.